Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. So in the previous videos, we covered the basics of installing Blender onto your PCs as well as the user interface. Now in today's video, we'll be going over the basics of modeling, how you can get started with it, as well as creating your very own first model that we can use in our project down the line. So without further ado, let's jump right into it. So the first thing you need to do before you get started with your modeling is to save your blend file. Now the reason why you should do this at the beginning of your modeling process is because after you made some progress, if your file crashes for some reason, you lose your whole progress. So instead of that, what you can do is save the file at the beginning of the process and have a backup of sorts so that you can reference it later. So to save your file, you can just go into File and click Save As and add it to a specific folder. And make sure you name it as well. And I'm going to save my blend file. So you've saved our blend file. Now let's get into the modeling part. So the model we are trying to create in today's video is this model right here. This is a simple basic model. So we'll use this model in our game as well. So we are going to model it for game engines. So there are a few things we should keep in mind while modeling an object for a specific game engine. In our use case, it's going to be Unity. So it's fairly simple. Now let's get started on that. So the first thing we need to do is open up our reference image, that is this one, on a separate monitor. If you don't have a separate monitor, what you can do is just drag and drop that image onto your blend scene. You can see it has appeared onto your scene. Now I just want to correct the rotation so that it is facing towards us. All you need to do is select the object, go into the object properties menu, and in the rotation section, make sure everything is correct. X and Y or X and Z is 0 and X is 90. So that it is facing towards us. Okay. So we have added our reference image to our scene. Now let's get started with the modeling part. So when you first look at the reference image, you can actually identify the shapes that are used to create this basic 3D model. If you look at the top part of the reference image, that is this area right here, you can fairly assume that it is created using a cylinder shape. So we don't have a cylinder shape over here. So I'm just going to delete this cube and create a new cylinder. Select the object and press X on your keyboard to delete that said object. Now there are two options to create an object inside of Blender. You can use the Shift A shortcut to add any sort of mesh onto your scene, or you can just go to the top left corner over to the add menu to add that specific shape. So I'll just look for the cylinder and add the cylinder onto our scene. So when you first create a cylinder, you can actually see it creates a drop down menu over here. It should be closed for you. You can just click this button to open it back up, and you can adjust the amount of vertices as well as the radius and all those settings you can adjust when you first create that object. So I want the vertices to be fairly simple and low. If you look at the reference image, you can see it's fairly blocky. So to get that blocky shape, I'll set it to around 16. You can see, get that blocky shape. And for the radius, I think it's fine. And the depth is, I'll just give it a little more depth. Yeah, so that should be fine. Once you click anywhere outside of this menu, the menu actually goes away. So make sure you make your adjustments before you click anywhere outside of that menu. Okay, so we have created our cylinder. Now let's start editing it. Now before we get into the editing part, I just wanted you to get familiar with the 3D viewport. Now instead of just editing the object from the front facing view, we can actually see it from different directions so that it helps us to edit it from all dimensions. Now there's a shortcut for that. Using your numpad key, you can press 1 to get the front view. You can press 3 on your numpad to get the right side, 9 on your numpad to get the left side, and 7 on your numpad to get the top view. I want to jump into the front view and rotate this cylinder so that it's facing the correct way before I start editing it. Now you can actually rotate it using this gizmo, or you can just press the R key after you select the object. So specific direction. So I just want to rotate it over here. You can do that, or you can just type in 90 on the rotation menu as well. I want to change this mesh to look like our treasure chest right here. So to edit an object inside of Blender, you have to go into the edit menu or the edit mode. There are two options you can do to access this edit mode. One is you can press tab on your keyboard, or you can just go into the top left corner. You can see currently it is set to object mode. You can just click on that button and switch over into edit mode. So I prefer you learn your shortcuts from the beginning itself so that it will be easier for you to follow along with the tutorials. So I'll just go into the side view, press tab, and you can see now I can select individual vertices and I can move them. And if I press X like we did with the cube earlier, I can even delete those vertices. So what I want to do is delete half of these vertices so that I can get this specific shape on the top part of the chest. And for the bottom part, we'll create a new object and model it accordingly. And I'll just select these vertices. And before I delete them, if I look over to the other side, you can actually see it has only selected vertices on this side and not this side. That is because when you select an object from a specific direction, it will only select what you are seeing from this direction. Now, what if I want to select something that is behind as well? We'll have to actually press this button to activate X-ray mode. It will basically tell Blender when I'm drawing over this part of the mesh, I want to select the other side as well. So I'll just draw over this. And if I go out into the front view, you can see it has selected the other side as well. Now, if I press X and vertices, you can see it has deleted. Now, before we get further into editing this mesh, I want to let you in on a secret or a hack you can use while modeling symmetrical objects. The thing about symmetrical objects is that you can model one half and use a modifier that is built in Blender to create the other half. You don't have to manually create both sides of that single mesh. Now, how do we implement that into this model? So let's see how we can do that. Now I'm going to toggle off the X-ray view so that I can clearly see the model. How can I divide this chest into two different halves without also losing the face? To do that, what I can do is add an extra edge right in the middle of the object so that it is split into two different faces. The shortcut for that is Ctrl R. When you press it, you can actually see it is showing a yellow outline where your mouse cursor is. So if I bring it over here, it appears over here. If I bring it over there, it appears over there. And now what I can do is use my scroll to add or to delete the number of vertices I want to add to this mesh. I just want a single edge at the middle of the mesh. But if you want to add multiple edges, you can just move your mouse scroll wheel to add more edges. So since I just want a single one, I'll just press enter to apply that edge. Now you can see it has created a new edge and it has split up our faces. Now if I select this whole side, so make sure I just select everything. And if I delete it, you can see we still have this half remaining because we have a new edge at the center of the mesh. How will Blender actually create the opposite side? Now to do that, we'll have to add something known as a modifier. Now to add modifiers, you'll have to go into the modify section. That is this spanner or wrench looking thing over here. Make sure you click it and go into add modifiers. And you can see there are a bunch of modifiers. Don't get confused. We'll be using a single modifier in this video, that is the mirror modifier. When I add it, you can automatically see it has generated the bottom half of the cylinder, which we don't want. I can just press the X button. You can see it has gone. We just want it to create on the opposite side. If I press Z, you can see it has created a mirror version of this side on the other side. Now the best part about this mirror modifier is that if I were to go into edit mode by pressing tab on my keyboard and move these objects on this side, it will also affect the object on the other side. So that is the main use case of the mirror modifier, so that you'll have to only model one side of the object instead of spending the whole time modeling both sides. Now, before we get started with adding detail onto this object, I want to fill up this area so that it looks similar. I'll tap into edit mode by pressing tab and I'll select this whole edge. There are two ways of doing this. You can use the 2 on your keyboard, or you can just switch over into the top left corner, select specific mode of selection. The first one, or the number 1 key on your keyboard, is vertex, 2 is for edge, 3 is for face. Now I've switched over to edge selection and I want to select this whole edge. All you need to do is select this end of the edge, go to the other side, and by pressing Alt and select this ending edge. It also works with vertices and faces. All you have to do is select the first face and the last face. And when you're selecting the last face, make sure you press Alt on your keyboard. Now we have selected it. Now all you need to do is press F on your keyboard, edge, to give a face. Now let's jump in and add some details. So let's start adding these rings around the chest. Now I'll just switch over into edit mode by pressing tab. So just like how we added this edge over here, what we can do is press Ctrl R again to add an edge so that we can extrude that face to get this projection effect at the corner of the chest. Now if you remember earlier, select this face. When you're selecting the last face, make sure you are holding down Alt to select all the faces in between as well. Right click, you can use the extrude along face normals menu so that it looks similar to what we have here. You can actually do that at the front of the chest as well. I'll just add another edge over here and select this face and extrude along face normals as well. Now we get into one of our first issues. If I try to add an edge over here, you can see I'm getting this white spot and I'm not able to add an edge. We still need to get this edge over here. Is there any other tool that we can use to get this edge? Now that is where the knife tool comes in. So knife tool basically allows us to add edges or vertices into specific points instead of just throughout the mesh. To access the knife tool, you can just press K and you can just select this point right here and draw till here and press enter to make that into a face that you created. Now I'm able to select this whole face, but as you can see, it is still not connected throughout. Now what I can do is just press Ctrl R over here to add a new edge and use the knife tool again to connect it towards the edge we created earlier. Now if I were to select all these faces and extrude along face normals, we can actually see we are getting the desired effect we wanted. The extrusion at the middle part as well, just like what we did earlier. Ctrl R to add the edge loop, and while holding Alt you can select the faces. And if you want to deselect a specific face, what you can do is while holding Shift you can just select the face you want to deselect and extrude the only faces you want to extrude. So we have created the top part, we have basically completed it. Now let's focus on the bottom part of the chest. So what I'll do is select the top part of the chest and press H on my keyboard to hide it. Don't worry, it is not deleted, it is still here. You can just go into the outliner and press this eye icon, turn it back on, or you can just press Alt H to bring it back. Now if you look carefully, you can see the bottom half is basically a cube with a few extrusions on the side. So I'll just go into that menu and create a cube, and I'll just bring it to the top so that it sits on the grid. Now I'll just reactivate our top part and bring it over so that when I create bottom half, it matches with the size and scale of the top part as well. I want it to scale into a specific direction. So to do that, you can press S and choose the axis you want to scale it. For me, that is the X axis, and you can just press or move your mouse cursor to scale it into that specific direction. If I do that again, S and D, you can see it works too. Okay, I might have scaled it a bit too far. So let's scale it back in by pressing S and then X so that it fits. Now that we have finished scaling it so that it matches the top part, I'm going to disable the top part again. Okay, so we have created the basic shape, but if you look at the reference image, you can actually see the cube is actually tapered towards the end, moving in or caving in towards itself. So how do I achieve that effect? To do that, I can just tap into edit mode, select the face and press S and scale it down so that we get that tapering effect at the bottom of the chest. Press Ctrl R to add an edge in between and go into vertex select all these vertices and delete it. Then just like what I did with the top part, I'm going to add a mirror modifier, and you can see it is duplicated on the other side. Now for the edges, I'm going to do the same what I did for the top part of the chest. I'll just add a few loop cuts so that we get the basic shape we want. Forgot to add another edge over here. Okay, so we have selected all the faces. Now we can just open up the menu by right clicking and extrude along face normals. Now if you look carefully, you can actually see it is not looking very similar to that because the corner pieces of this chest are bigger when compared to the rest of them. So what we can do is select these corner pieces and extrude them once again. Do that for the back as well. Now if we were to activate the top part, you can actually see we are basically done with the chest. Now all I need to do is add the lock for the chest as well. Now I want to create my cube at this specific location, but if I were to create a cube right now by pressing Shift A and cube, you can see actually appears here. That is because if you look carefully, you can see a 3D cursor of sorts that is at the center of this cube. So that is actually movable. You can actually place it anywhere you want by holding Shift and right mouse button. So if I were to place it over here, you can see it sticks on there, over here, here. So what I'm going to do is delete this cube first and place that 3D cursor over here. Now if I were to create my cube, you can see my cube actually appears here, but it is fairly big. So I'm going to use the S key to scale it down. So if you look carefully at the reference, you can actually see the cube is a bit longer on the bottom part. So just like what I did with the bottom part of this chest, what I'm going to do is select this face over here and bring it down so that you get that same effect. Select the face you want to add the hole to and press I on your keyboard to insect that face. Based on your preference, you can scale it in or out using your mouse. Now what we can do is, instead of extruding it outward, I can just extrude it inward. Now for the hook or the locking mechanism on the chest, it's fairly simple. You can just create another cube, scale it down, place it accordingly, and scale it in specific axis. And there you have it, you get that specific shape. Now, if you look carefully, the edge of this lock is fairly different. It is not as blocky as what we have created. Now, there is a simple step you can do to get that smooth edge. All you need to do is press tab on your keyboard and select the edge you want to change. So press 2 to go into edge selection menu, or you can just press this button over here. So select both of the edges and you can just press Ctrl B. So what that actually does is it bevels the edge. So basically it divides the edge and basically averages the space between them to give you a new flat face. And it also makes it look like what we have in our reference image. Now, since the bottom half is also similar to the top lock or the top locking mechanism, what I can do is just select this part and press Shift D to duplicate the object. And since it's coming to the bottom part, I'll just scale it down so that it fits correctly. And I'll just also go into edit mode and select all these vertices and make sure X-ray vision is turned on so that I can select all these vertices and move it to the top so that it looks good. So the basic modeling part of the chest is completed. As we move along with the other videos, we'll be adding much more detail as well as texture to this model before we export it from Blender and add it into Unity to integrate this model into our games. So that was just a basic overview into modeling using Blender 3D. Now in the upcoming videos, we'll be going into texturing as well as exporting this model that we created inside of Blender into Unity and integrating it with our AR application. So if you like this video, make sure to give this video a thumbs up as well as subscribe and turn on the bell notification to get notified whenever we post a new video. Also, share this video with your friends who are interested in 3D art creation as well as game development. Until next time, bye.